Evening. On behalf of the Commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the June 25th, 2024 City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters relating to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint powers agencies as the city may be a member of or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please put your electronic devices on silent. Kara, could you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Bielski?
Present.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Here.
Commissioner DeMarchi?
Here.
Commissioner Knox has an excused absence. Commissioner Maish? Absent. Commissioner Springer has an excused absence as well. And then Chair Webb.
Present. Commissioner Bielski, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 on the agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. Not seeing any public comment, I'd like to move to our next item, which is approval of the minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the April 23rd, 2024 minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Next on our agenda is requests and presentations. First up is the Roseville Electric Utility Monthly Update. Today's report is by Electric Utility Assistant Director Eric Campbell, who will be summarizing the monthly status of the electric utility activities for information.
Hey, good evening, Chair Webb, Commissioners. Eric Campbell, Assistant Electric Utility Director with Roseville Electric. Just a real quick update tonight, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of material. I'm going to begin with a focus on customer relationships, and probably the biggest item right now is the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project. We've completed that project this month for both residential and commercial customers, so we've gone out and swapped out 120,000 either meters or endpoints. This project has taken quite a while. Started back in 2016, but it really didn't get into motion until I would say about 4 years ago. It took a lot of learning, a lot of integrations, and interfaces with other systems like Maximo, Oracle, things of that nature that made it much more complicated. But we're excited to have those meters and endpoints in place. One win that we have currently is over the past month when we've been using the technology to reconnect customers who've been disconnected for non-pay. It takes about 2 to 4 minutes to reconnect a customer remotely, and we've had 500 of those over the past month. So that's a pretty big win for us, and we're excited to see what else we can do going forward. Moving on, we're kind of, I'll say, branding the next part of AMI Day 2. And really what Day 2 is really, leveraging the functionality within the application. There are apps that we can push into the infrastructure, such as transformer loading. There's an app that can let us know if there's an EV at the property, if there's solar at the property. It can actually do some calculations for us on correlations on the impact of the EV on the infrastructure. So it's going to be a pretty important planning tool for us going forward, and we're looking forward to it. Chair Webb, you've asked about time of day rates a number of times. We're going to be looking at a pilot for time of day rates next fall. That'll probably be around the November timeframe. We'll look at a pilot of about 12 months or so. Get our feet wet and see what kind of appetite we have for rolling out across the city. But you'll be able to opt into that program next November.
So 2024 or 2025?
2025, so next November. We need to take about a year or so to gather data to really inform our load shapes, to understand, usage patterns and what kind of pricing mechanism we want to use. We don't want these rates to be punitive. We want to make sure they're useful and they're benefiting the customers. Next, customer programs. When we brought the rate proposal to you a few months back, we had committed to making some adjustments in our income qualified programs, our electric, I'll say assistance programs. We have done that effective the month of June. So the discount for low income is now 20%. It was 15%. We've also implemented a permanent $15 credit for those customers as well. So that's been implemented this month. In terms of the rate implementation that was approved a few months back, we haven't had a whole lot of feedback. That increase was effective on June 1st. There's been a couple clarifying questions, but nothing of significance, so it's been pretty uneventful. Next, I'll talk about financial strength. I think you're all aware that we have a hydroelectric surcharge that we update that annually. We submitted I'll say it's the GIM, the General Information Memorandum, to City Council recently to put that rate in place. We are going to have a hydro rate, even though we had all the rainfall earlier this year. Rainfall is around 89 to 90% of norm right now. So there is a bit of a shortfall in the marketplace. If you recall that we changed the mechanism we use to calc the rate, we did base it off of precipitation levels in the past, but now we're actually basing it off of deliveries that we get from NCPA, Northern California Power Administration, or WAPA. And so we've based it off of that. The rate itself is going to be less than 1%, about 0.87. So the average residential customer will see about $1.23 impact to their bill over the year. So not a big number. We did include that number in terms of revenue in our FY25 budget planning. And so there's a net zero impact to our budget from a hydroelectric perspective. Resource planning. Going back to the month of, or not the month, but the week of June 9th, we took a planned outage to swap out some equipment, getting ready for the summer run. This is a preventative step that we took. We've had some difficulties with what's called the variable frequency drive, the VFD, some failures. And so we swapped out the VFD on CT1 earlier this month, so it doesn't happen during the summer months. All of our resources are up and running, so we're in pretty good shape as we go into the summer. We're continuing to work with California Department of Water Resources and the CEC on taking ownership of the RPEAK units. Those are the two units that we've had out at REP for the past several months. We're on a path to taking ownership. And if everything goes well and as planned, we're probably looking at about 3 to 4 months out in terms of taking ownership of those resources. We'll be able to monetize those and start selling off capacity and things of that nature to help our customers. Renewables, we're continuing to look at renewables projects to maintain compliance in the out years. There's a number of items that we're looking at right now. And then finally, our team, just wanted to touch on that quick. We're sending a large contingent of women to a Women in Public Power Conference next month with Northwest Public Power Association. We opened the invitation up to everyone in the organization, and I think we got around 10 to 12. We didn't want to tell anyone no. We think it's a pretty important event for folks to attend and get to know folks and interact and network and things of that nature. And so we're excited to send them off next month. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff at this
I
time?
have one. You mentioned a VFD was replaced. They are really, really expensive, and it costs a bloody fortune. You replaced it. Can you repair the one that you have to keep as a spare, or is it junk?
There's been some cracking in the previous one, and there was some cracking in the one on CT2, and it actually caused a problem for us, so it brought the unit down. And so we proactively replaced both.
Yeah, okay.
Questions? No? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not seeing any public comment. Thank you very much for your presentation, Eric.
Thank you.
Next item is also from the Roseville Electric Utility. This is legislative and regulatory update. Tonight's presentation is by the Legislative and Regulatory Manager Amber Blixt, summarizing key energy-related legislation and regulation for our information.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Webb and Commissioners. I'm Amber Blixt, Legislative and Regulatory Manager with the Electric Utility, and today I'm going to give an overview of the legislative and regulatory advocacy and issues that we have been engaged in so far in 2024. So I wanted to start first with the state regulatory item. Eric just touched on it a bit, but I wanted to delve in a little bit to the California Energy Commission's Distributed Electricity Backup Assets Program and the grant funding opportunity that we applied for. The DEBA program, which I'll refer to it as DEBA here on out, is seeking efficiency upgrades and capacity additions to existing bulk grid power generators in California to support the electric grid during extreme events. Roseville applied for the CEC DEBA grant funding opportunity in February of this year, and in April, the CEC released their notice of proposed award, which ranked Roseville first in the applicant pool and recommended Roseville for up to $1.5 million in grant funding for the project. As part of the DEBA program, Roseville is proposing to add equipment to the State Power Augmentation Project, or the SPAP units, that are currently owned by the California Department of Water Resources that are located here in Roseville and also operated by Roseville Electric. So formal consideration of the grant is expected to occur at a CEC business meeting, which is currently anticipated in the July timeframe. And contractually, as Eric mentioned, DEBA approval is one of the two triggers for Roseville's potential ownership of the units. So we're very pleased to have been recommended for award in DEBA program, and we're moving forward with that process now. The next regulatory item that I wanted to discuss was regarding CARB's, the California Air Resources Board's cap and trade program. With the California Air Resources Board is proposing changes to their program that are expected to be approved by the end of this year. And their proposal speaks to increasing the stringency of the cap and trade program, which regulates greenhouse gas emissions from covered entities like Roseville. We've been working closely with our trade associations and other electric utilities to support minimal changes to the regulation, especially with respect to allowance allocation, the consignment of allowances, and the use of the allowance values, which are the primary issues that CARB is focusing on in relation to electric utilities. Many publicly owned utilities like us made investment decisions and portfolio projections based on a program that was set out to 2030 without unexpected changes to the program midway. So this is really part of our concerns with what's being proposed. We've been very active in monitoring any potential changes that CARB is putting out there. We've also been meeting with CARB staff and working on comments with our trade associations to address our concerns. So we'll continue to keep the commission updated on any changes that CARB puts forward throughout the rest of the year. Moving on to some of our legislative issues, first wanted to highlight kind of where we're at in the legislative calendar. So I'm sure you folks have been following in the news, but the budget has been a hot topic this year, and we just met. We're about a little past the halfway point in terms of the legislative calendar, with the budget bill being passed by June 15th. We expect a lot of negotiations to continue throughout this week in terms of tidying that up. The last day for each house to pass bills is at the end of August, and then September 30th is the last day for the governor to sign and veto bills. So now I wanted to move forward and give the committee an update of some of the bills that we've tracked throughout the year. And given that we're kind of later in the legislative process, some of these bills have been resolved at this point in time, but wanted the commission to see kind of some of the areas that we've been involved in. AB 2221 would have established several shot clocks for local publicly owned electric utilities to approve and energize broadband projects. And we were concerned that this bill would have created an additional level of regulation that is not needed, as several shot clocks already exist in existing law. In addition, the City of Roseville has existing policies in place that are working well with our communication providers and meeting the existing shot clocks that exist. We opposed AB 2221 through our trade associations, and successful advocacy ultimately led to this bill being held, and it's no longer moving forward this year. Similarly, AB 2619 related to net energy metering would have required us to revise our net energy metering tariff and make the new tariff available by January 1 of 2027. We opposed AB 2619 through our trade groups, and the bill is no longer moving forward at this time. Strong advocacy prevented additional duties on publicly owned utilities that would have been prescribed by AB 2619. SB 1508 is a bill that's continuing to move forward. It originally required publicly owned utilities to initiate a process to determine appropriate targets for us to procure energy storage systems by the end of 2028, 2030, and 2035, and then to report those targets to the California Energy Commission. As a practical matter, publicly owned utilities are really already evaluating storage within our portfolio. And so we worked with our trade associations to oppose this bill unless amended. As a result, the battery storage procurement requirement was removed from the bill, and now we've taken a neutral position on SB 1508. AB 2815 would require the California Energy Commission to provide funding through the Clean Transportation Program for the repair or replacement of non-operational electric vehicle charging stations that are at least 5 years old and that were installed before January 1, 2024, and that are located in a publicly available parking space. This bill would also require the Energy Commission to allocate at least 50% of the funding for low-income or disadvantaged communities and requires match funding or in-kind contributions. We have been monitoring this bill to see if there's any potential benefits to our community in the future, and we'll continue to monitor this bill as it moves through the process. Next, this was a very controversial bill this session. It was a trailer bill related to the California Energy Commission's surcharge cap increase. Thankfully, in late May, the Senate and Assembly Budget Committees both voted to reject the CEC's budget proposal, and this would have raised the statutory cap on the CEC's Energy Resource Program Account, or ERPA, and that's a surcharge, and that would have extended the surcharge to behind-the-meter electricity consumption using a complex formula that estimates solar generation. We had ongoing concerns with this proposal because it would increase costs to our customers, and we also had concerns with the implementation of the behind-the-meter requirement, which would have required us to rework our billing systems to accommodate the formula that was being put forth in the legislation. We oppose the legislation with our trade associations, and we're supportive of the committee's proposal to reject the bill. I will say that this is the ERPA funds are expected to be insolvent at the CEC in the 2026-2027 timeframe. So I think this is a bill that we will continue to see going forward. So we'll be looking at this bill as it continues to move forward. But for now, the bill is not proposed to pass this year. And then moving on to the federal things that we are tracking, we are pleased that the Department of Energy revised its proposed efficiency standards for distribution transformers. The final rule will require only 25% of new transformers to use the new amorphous steel cores, while the remaining 75% of transformers will continue to use the traditional grain-oriented electrical steel. The final rule will allow five years for implementation rather than the 3-year implementation schedule that was previously proposed. And I'm sure as many of you are aware, the Electric Department has been advocating for a change to the Department of Energy's proposed efficiency standards for distribution transformers, specifically because this equipment has been impacted by supply chain shortages. So we view, the department views the final rule as a significant improvement from the DOE's prior proposal, and we'll continue to monitor supply chain impacts for distribution transformers going forward. And then finally, in terms of our federal advocacy updates, in late April, the Electric Department had the opportunity to participate in the Northern California Power Agencies and the Northwest Public Power Agencies Federal Policy Conference in Washington, D.C. The electric utility group had meetings with several key energy agencies and members of Congress while we were there. And then later in May, we had the opportunity to circle back on Roseville-specific issues through our own City of Roseville federal advocacy trip, which included the electric department, the environmental utilities department, housing, public works, the city manager's office, and our mayor all in attendance. The team had an opportunity to showcase the full service benefits that Roseville provides while advocating on items of importance to our community. The trip included over 20 meetings over the 3-day period and was very successful in terms of bringing attention to Roseville's issue at the federal level. So we thought that was a great opportunity that we were able to be engaged in this year and kind of a full service city perspective. And that concludes my legislative and regulatory update.
Does anyone from the commission have questions for Amber?
Just, what was the rationale behind Carrillo's bill to begin with? It seems,
I think there's been a lot of delays in other cities, and I think that's coming to a head, and so they're trying to create additional legislation to put shot clocks on timing of getting these projects energized. That's not an issue that we've had in Roseville, thankfully, and we've been meeting all the existing shot clocks. But we were supportive of our folks that are kind of opposing this bill.
thank you.
Oh, I have a question. What's a shot clock?
So shot clocks is the time allowed to respond to an application for a permit to energize a broadband project or to approve a broadband project. And so 15 days, 45 days are a number that we would hear, which is challenging if you could have up to 300 applications, right, in like larger cities. So that's why you'll see a lot of publicly owned utilities kind of opposing these types of bills.
Yeah, go ahead.
One last question. The efficiency standards on transformers, does that solve our problem altogether now, pretty much, as far as getting them?
No, I don't think it solves our problem. I think there's still questions of domestic manufacturing and things like that, but it doesn't exacerbate the problem.
Okay, all right.
How's the current inventory level?
Yeah, we have sufficient transformers. We've received transformers to support growth. We're actually in pretty good shape at this point in time from that perspective. Orders are now flowing again.
Any other questions from the commission for staff? Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not seeing any public comment. I want to thank you for your presentation, Amber. Next up, we've got the Roseville Electric Summer Preparedness Plan for 2024. Tonight's presentation is by the Electric Customer Programs Supervisor, David Bradford, Operations Manager, Jason Grace, and Power Supply and Portfolio Manager, Petra Wallace, giving us an overview of the 2024 Summer Preparedness Plan.
Thank you for having us. So we're here tonight to talk to you a little bit about how we prepare for our peak summer load. Many of you may know that that's kind of in the middle to late summer for us in Roseville. A lot of air conditioner load during that time. We kind of divided this conversation into 3 areas. We have grid operations, power supply, and communications, which I think is on that slide there. And now we're done with that slide, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So what you're looking at here, these pictures depict what you would typically see out throughout the city. Those green boxes on the left there, those 4, there's roughly 30,000 of those spread out along with those power poles up on the upper right there, kind of everywhere. They provide a specific function to the electric system. They're important to us. To the public, they just look like big green boxes, but they are essential in order to operate the power grid. The lower right, that's a kind of a typical area of a substation, which is typically fenced off away from the public. We have 18 substation and switchyard sites that are treated sort of differently. They have their own assets, similar in function to what those do, but on a different scale. And there, like I said, there's individual inspections for those, as well as for the other ones, which I'll get into in a later slide. So on the next slide, you're going to see here These are basically all the conductors in the city, the overhead and the underground conductors that kind of link all that equipment together, collectively forming our power grid. There's over 900 miles, circuit miles, of facilities there, conductors that we manage. On the left are our underground circuits. You can see that that's the majority of them. On the right, you can see our overhead. And if you were to superimpose the right picture into the left, it would fit perfectly like a puzzle piece. It's roughly 43 square miles. And like I said, those are basically the wiring connecting all the substations and those 30,000 units together. So on this slide, we're talking a little bit about what we do to maintain that grid, to keep it up and running. So we have a pretty robust inspection program. We provide annual inspections, visual inspections of every one of those assets. We have work orders for all those that are fired off at different times of the year. Qualified staff that performs the same. We also provide a detailed, every 4.5 years, we do a detailed inspection where we're taking those same assets and we're getting hands-on. We'll open up equipment, those green enclosures. We'll go inside of substations monthly, look at everything that's in there, make sure it's all in operational order. Of course, certain times of year you don't want to take equipment down for maintenance, especially during our peak summer load. So we try to plan that. In fact, the whole planning process is kind of a separate issue in itself that we do. We want to plan around our customers' loads so we're not taking any unnecessary outages during that process. That also coincides with our wood pole inspections, and we have a what we call an intrusive inspection for those. And we have a device that actually is used that once we're finished with the inspection, it tells us whether or not that pole is structurally stable, if it's still sound to carry the conductor and the load of a person climbing it. If not, then we'll take the appropriate action, which is typically to replace the pole. Let's see, we have routine and reactive maintenance. A lot of things, as you can imagine, pop up over time. We got vehicles that crash into equipment, especially around the time summer starts. It seems to be an uptick in that for us. That's pretty normal. Capital projects, those are typically pre-planned throughout the year, and it's part of the budget cycle as well. The engineering team will work closely with the power grid operations personnel, and we will construct these projects. Some of them are improvements that allow for additional capacity or equipment upgrades, some type of a benefit to the system. All of this is basically done in concert to keep the power grid reliable, but most importantly, safe for our customers and for our staff that operate it.
So if you can stay on this slide, so Jason was more into the details, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit and then talk overall California a little bit, that it has 9 balancing areas, as you can see it on the map. And our neighboring one, it's the California ISO, which is the California Independent System Operator, which is about 80% of California's demand. Roseville Electric, or City of Roseville, is within the Balancing Authority of Northern California, which is about 8% of California's demand. And Roseville is about 7% of banks, so we are a small change in a big system. The other bank members, I just wanted to list them, are including SMUD, or the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, Roseville, Redding, Modesto, Shasta, Trinity, and Western Area Power Administration. So as Eric mentioned earlier, the reservoir levels where the hydro water year was decent, so it was still below average. But reservoirs are slowly filling up, so we are expecting in fiscal year 2025 to get a little less than 90% of our average hydro. So that's why we have a little bit of the hydro surcharge coming starting July 1 of 25 or 24. On the next slide, we can see Bank's summer 2024 outlook, which looks pretty good. The forecasted peak for the whole balancing area is about 4,600 megawatts, and the supply that we have on hand is about 1,000 megawatts over. So the balancing area as a whole that we are part of looks overall pretty good. And there is no significant transmission or generation outages planned. Again, there's a lot that can happen out of our control: forest fires, transmission coming down from the Pacific Northwest. So those are all out of our control. But what we can currently control, it's all looking good so far for this summer. And when we are looking at Roseville summer, again, the forecast looks good. Our peak forecast for this summer, it's 325 megawatts, but we have over about 400 megawatts of supply. The reserve margin for good utility practice, it's about 115%, but Roseville's internal policy, we came up with 120% of peak demand for the month of May, June, July, August, and September, just to be on the safer side.
All right. My name is David Bradford. I'm the Acting Public Information Officer for Roseville Electric Utility. We heard, Jason took us through our grid operations, which is basically making sure how we're prepared to deliver power out to our community. Petra touched on our power resources, making sure that we're prepared with enough power to meet our summer peaks. And I'll be hitting on communications, making sure that our community is prepared for the summer peaks and knows what to do in the event of an emergency. I'll be taking you through our communication strategy at this time. It basically consists of three main ideas. One, communicating early and often. Two, helping our customers conserve energy. And three, keeping our community informed. The best way to keep our community safe in a power emergency is to ensure that they're prepared and know what to do. One of the benefits of having a full-service city is our ability to communicate and collaborate with other city departments, including public safety. If we move into a power emergency, our messaging will be consistent with police and fire to ensure our community is aware of designated cooling areas, how to get there, and what to do. We also partner with other departments in the event we need to put together a department operations center or an emergency management center. We have multiple channels to communicate with our community. Our new outage management system is designed to schedule and automate communications using the most effective channels, namely email, text, and phone. We also communicate through social media, the city's new My Roseville app, and our website. Our communications are focused on being prepared by identifying resources before an outage, like knowing where to go and preparing an emergency kit. Our community's behavior can have significant impact on our ability to weather a heat storm. Our communication plan includes education to help our community know the most impactful ways to conserve energy. If you recall, a few years ago, we were in a statewide critical demand situation with a long run of very hot weather. And at that time, our governor's office issued a text alert. And from that text alert, we saw an immediate reduction in energy use. And so it goes to show that there is significant impact in customers' behavior. Shifting energy use away from peak demand times is the best way to participate. In your home, the best place to start is with your pool pumps, AC thermostats, and major appliances. You can also do things like cook outdoors, pre-cool your home, or delay your EV charging. At work, businesses can shift operations, curtail HVAC, lighting, or even go to backup generation if feasible, and as well delay fleet EV charging. Keeping our community informed is a top priority for us. Our summer preparedness campaign begins in May and runs through September. We encourage our community to stay informed by keeping their contact information current. This can be easily done on our website. Sign up for outage communication through our outage management tool, again, easily done on our website. Follow us on social media and download the My Roseville app. Signing up to receive communication is one of the best ways our community can prepare and to be prepared this summer and every summer following. And this concludes our presentation on summer preparedness. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take those at this time.
Do any commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
I just have a comment. I have no idea there's that much thermal out there. You think of the geysers and that's it. But I mean, wow.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
It's
Is there
still out
anyone?
there. Yeah, go ahead. No, we have some out there, so I think it was a good representation of still in the balancing authority. What do we have and what's kind of the reality of generation resources?
Is there anyone from the public who'd like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not seeing any public comment. I want to thank you for your presentation, for all three of you. Thanks.
Your time.
Next up is our Environmental Utilities Monthly Update. This report is by our Environmental Utilities Assistant Director, Devin Whittington, summarizing the monthly status of the environmental utilities activities. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, good evening, Commissioners. So this update this evening, we have one business item and then 3 fun items that we like to report on. So we'll get down to the business part of it. So our capacity fees are currently underway for all 3 utilities. And what the capacity fees are, this is what we charge development to connect to our systems. That's what they have to pay for the capacity of those systems. And that's underway for, again, all 3 utilities, water, wastewater, and waste services. We're also in the final selection process of a new rate consultant that will also help us out for rates with all 3 utilities. Those rates will basically go into effect next July, so we'll be bringing those to you in the next spring of 2025. And then we get to the fun stuff here. So last week we got to celebrate Waste Workers Appreciation Week. This is where we kind of spend a week just to appreciate all of our folks that are in the waste industry. This includes everybody from a driver to our CSRs to our supervisors and everybody that's within that utility. And also last week, we on Thursday, we had a big trucks event. We had 1,400 people show up at that event. That was the garbage trucks. The finale for that event will be this Thursday. Tomorrow will actually be the electric utility. So we'll see if they can actually beat that 1,400 number. Just had to, And then lastly, Maurice Cheney, the PIO for Environmental Utilities, accepted an award from the California Association of Public Information Officers, the Paul B. Clark Award. This recognizes his exceptional leadership, professional commitment, and a lifetime achievement. This is a pretty big award. Maurice has been very influential in all of our marketing campaigns that you see within the utilities, and it's really a tribute to what we do here at the city and have folks like Maurice. So with that concludes my update. Do you guys have any questions?
Not seeing any questions from
Sure.
the commissioners. Thank you for your presentation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not seeing any public comment. Thank you for your update, Devin. Our next item is the Roseville Environmental Utilities Legislative and Regulatory Update. And tonight's presentation is by the Utility Government Relations Administrator, Noel Maddock, summarizing the key legislation and regulations pertaining to water, wastewater, and waste services utilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb and Commissioners. Noel Maddock, I'm happy to be here this evening to provide you an overview of issues that we've been working on for this first half of this year. Tonight, I will be covering state legislation with the following topics: connection and capacity charges, Proposition 218 and rate setting, per and polyfluoral alkyl substances, extended producer responsibility, and low-income rate assistance programs. Additionally, I will cover some regulatory updates at the state and federal level, and we'll close out with an update on federal legislation. The first measures I will cover this evening are dealing with the ability of local agencies to collect connection and capacity charges. As we've actually seen over the past few years, the legislature has introduced legislation that they believe will spur housing development. Their focus is generally on limiting local government's ability to manage growth and our ability to collect fees to mitigate the impact on our current residents, or eliminate the requirement of new homes to pay for their fair share of connecting to existing systems. This year was no exception. There were a number of bills introduced aimed at limiting the ability of local governments to collect connection and capacity charges. I am happy to share with the Commission that we have been successful in obtaining amendments to all of the bills that removes the water and wastewater industry's opposition at this time. Tonight, I will cover just 2 of the 6 measures that we have been working on. The first bill is SB 937, which would have prohibited local agencies from requiring fees to be paid for on development projects until after the date of final inspection or the date when the certificate of occupancy was issued. The next measure is SB 1210, and that bill would, for new housing construction, prohibit a connection and capacity charge or other point of connection charge from a public utility to exceed 1% of the reported building permit value of that housing unit, so severely restricting the ability to actually recoup actual costs. The next measure I will take up is dealing with Proposition 218 in rate setting. AB 2257 by Assemblywoman Wilson is sponsored by the Association of California Water Agencies and would create an exhaustion of administrative remedies procedures for the Proposition 218 protest process. That's a lot of P's. The exhaustion of administrative remedies would apply when local agency follows all of the steps, some of which include a minimum 45-day posting and protest period requirement, consideration and written responses to each of the protests, and requires actions to be taken by the governing body of the local agency. Staff is supportive of this measure for 2 main reasons. First, we believe it will promote dialogue and transparency with customers and provide us an opportunity to address concerns during the actual rate-making process. And second, should we elect to follow the exhaustion of the administrative remedies procedures, we would receive some additional protection from Proposition 218 lawsuits. The next measure I would like to share this evening is SB 903 that was co-sponsored by the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. Last year, Governor Newsom vetoed similar legislation, citing a lack of regulatory oversight to properly implement the restrictions that were contained in the bill. He called on the Department of Toxic Substances Control to work with the legislature to find alternative solutions that protect consumers and effectively address public health and environmental concerns. This measure sought to address the issue cited in the governor's veto message by requiring DTSC to develop regulations for the enforcement of a ban on the use of intentionally added PFAS to products. PFAS is a substance that can potentially affect actually all 3 of our utilities under EU's umbrella. To date, Roseville is very fortunate that we have not found PFAS in our drinking water system. But as a passive receiver, Roseville is supportive of source control measures that can ultimately help protect our ratepayers. Unfortunately, this measure was held in the Appropriations Committee and is no longer moving this year. The next measure is SB 1255 by Senator Durazo. This measure was actually a gut and amend after it passed out of its House of Origin. For a little over a decade, advocates have sought to create a rate assistance program for water customers. Historically, they proposed that local agencies collect the funding and send it to the state to distribute. That, from staff's view, was a violation of Proposition 218. And more recently, in 2022, the legislature passed SB 222 that created a statewide rate assistance program, but it was ultimately vetoed by the governor because there was no funding attached to that program. This year, the sponsors have taken a new approach. The proposal has local agencies collecting the funds and distributing them locally. This is in an attempt to address Proposition 218 and 26 concerns. However, the devil really is in the details. The sponsors are using the community choice aggregation opt-out model, which is something that staff believes is disingenuous and will cause irreparable harm to the trust we have built with our customers. The bill would require water agencies to create a LIRA program that does the following. Automatically enrolls eligible ratepayers into the program. An eligible ratepayer is a household at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. The benefit to eligible ratepayers at minimum is to be 20%. Requires water agencies to automatically place on a customer's bill a suggested amount of contribution that they should be providing. If a water agency cannot provide a benefit of at least 10% or $5, whichever is greater, and cover their admin costs, then the water agency would have to provide crisis assistance on an ongoing basis. Administrative costs for local agencies are capped at 10%, and only wastewater customers who are co-billed with their water service would also be required to receive the assistance of their wastewater charges. And conversely, the same thing on the charges for contributions for customers, it would apply to that portion of their bill as well. Roseville has actually been engaged in working groups on this proposal and have been successful.
Thank God.
As you are shaking your heads already, we have gotten a ton of amendments to make it to this point where we are right now. So we still have significant concerns, as you kind of have heard from my comments. One of the issues is we still believe that it has the potential to violate Proposition 218 with that 10% cap. And as crafted, it places excessive administrative burden and costs on ratepayers that exceed the benefit that potentially can be provided to our customers. One of the major concessions that we were able to get included in the bill was the grandfathering in of a local LIRA program that is in place by 2026 and meets the minimum benefit and auto-enrolls eligible customers. Currently, there's a team of us working with legal counsel to design a program that meets or exceeds the minimum requirements and can be implemented in compliance with Proposition 218 while maintaining the trust and goodwill with our ratepayers and meet our obligations per statute. As we anticipate this bill will become law, it was actually just heard in committee today. The last vote count I heard was it made it out of committee on a 6-0 vote. So you can see this is going to move. There was just one vote remaining to be heard. So it is moving on to its next committee. The next measure is SB 1143, dealing with extended producer responsibility. In 2010, Roseville City Council adopted Council Resolution 10278, which demonstrates Roseville's support of efforts to enact a comprehensive statewide extended producer responsibility law that allocates the end-of-life disposal costs with the producer of the product. SB 1143 by Senator Allen would create a producer responsibility program for products containing household hazardous waste by July 1st of 2027. Products to be covered would need to be posted to DTSC's website no later than January 1st of 2026, and one producer responsibility organization would have to be approved by January 1st of 2027. Producers of the covered products must join a producer responsibility organization and help to develop a plan detailing how the industry will meet this standard. The plan's costs will be proportionally distributed to member producers based on sales volume and relative disposal costs, encouraging less toxic alternatives and encouraging producers to pay their fair share. Roseville is supportive of SB 1143 as it shifts the onus off of consumers and municipalities and onto the producers responsible for making the materials. Now moving on to regulatory issues. The first issue is the state's adoption of a maximum contaminant level for hexavalent chromium, commonly referred to as Chrome 6, and that's how I will continue to refer to it as. You may recall that back in 2013, the state adopted an MCL for Chrome 6 at 10 parts per billion. The state was sued, and in 2017, the Sacramento Superior Court issued an order requiring the state to withdraw its controversial maximum contaminant level and establish a new MCL. The lawsuit alleged that the state failed to adequately consider the economic feasibility of the MCL when adopting it. The court agreed with the petitioners and ordered the Water Board to go back to the drawing board and issue a new MCL. Fast forward, on April 19th of this year, the Water Board adopted the MCL again of 10 parts per billion, as they had done back in 2013. They did provide additional time for smaller agencies to comply with the new MCL. And the Water Board's economic analysis projects this will cost water suppliers throughout California probably about $10.3 billion over the next 5 years. Of note, some of the same entities that sued the state back in 2013, on the day that it was adopted, they released a press release, which, in my opinion, kind of indicated that they may be looking at another lawsuit since they didn't move off that 10 parts per billion. Just so everyone has peace of mind, Roseville has not detected Chrome 6 in our water system, so we are not anticipating increased costs for treatment at this time. The next issue is making conservation a California way of life. In October, we shared with you the initial draft of the proposed regulation. Since that time, the second draft of the conservation regulation was released on March 12th for a 15-day comment period. The revised draft contained many improvements, such as delaying enforcement and compliance deadlines to 2027, inclusion of a temporary 20% buffer as recommended by DWR to account for data errors, and including residential pools as special landscape areas so they are no longer required to use 50% less water in the future. EU staff provided oral comments at the Water Board workshop on March 20th, and Roseville signed on to a Water Industry Coalition letter, and Roseville also submitted a comment letter signed by our mayor. Our goal was to keep the revisions made by the Water Board and staff and obtain additional modifications to the regulation. In our letter, we highlighted two main concerns: inclusion of an ongoing buffer for data inaccuracies and limitations due to using moment-in-time aerial imaging, because the buffer included in the revised regulation was only a temporary. The second issue we highlighted was how the regulation would be devastating to our existing urban tree canopy that in some cases have been nurtured for a century. Our tree canopies are vital to helping reduce heat island effects. Then on May 20th, the State Board released a third revised draft of the regulation for another 15-day comment period. This draft included new variants to address existing tree canopies. Roseville participated and submitted comments through our statewide trade association seeking to make the newly introduced tree variants more streamlined and less cost prohibitive to seek. And more recently, the State Water Board released yet another draft of the regulation on June 14th for another 15-day comment period. The changes were minimal in this draft and are technical in nature. Comments on that version are due July 1st. However, just this past Friday, I'm not bitter, at 4:30 in the afternoon, the Water Board staff sent out an agenda for their July 3rd board meeting, where the board is now going to be taking up the consideration of the adoption of that regulation. The last regulatory update is from the US EPA, who announced on April 10th that they adopted a national primary drinking water regulation for 6 per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and non-enforceable maximum contaminant level goals. The final rule requirements include that public water agencies will have 3 years to complete initial monitoring for the listed PFAS chemicals and to assess contamination levels and publicly provide the results by 2027. Public water systems will also have 5 years to implement solutions to reduce PFAS levels if systems monitoring reveals levels exceed the rule's maximum contaminant levels. And then starting in 2029, public water systems with PFAS levels that violate at least one of the rule's MCLs will have to take action to reduce the monitored levels and provide public information on it. Currently, Roseville is monitoring our drinking water for 29 PFAS derivatives through the 5th Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, which is commonly referred to as UCMR 5. And Roseville has not detected any PFAS at this time. So that's great news for us. And additionally, on April 5th, 2024, bringing it to the California side, California Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessments adopted public health goals for PFOA and PFAS. For PFOA, the public health goal is 0.007 parts per trillion, and for PFAS, the public health goal is 1 part per trillion. The next step we anticipate is that California will develop and adopt a state MCL, which we anticipate will be more stringent than the federal standard. Shifting to federal legislation, in April, Representative Curtis introduced H.R. 7944, which seeks to reinforce the polluter pays principle within the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, CERCLA, and that's how I will refer to it, by explicitly providing protections for passive receivers like Roseville, such as our water and wastewater, from liability. As part of Roseville's legislative platform, EU has taken a proactive approach by supporting the removal of PFAS from products where feasible, and supporting efforts to provide protections to passive receivers such as our water and wastewater and solid waste utilities. In a recent trip to Washington, D.C., Roseville met with US EPA and thanked them for their recently released guidance document that state that their intent isn't to go after the passive receivers, it's to go after the actual producers. However, we noted that this still leaves passive receivers like our utilities susceptible to third-party lawsuits from entities who are not part of a settlement agreement under CERCLA. So Roseville has taken a support position on this legislation. The next bill is H.R. 8032 by Representative Sorensen, which actually is a companion to Senator Padilla's Senate Bill 3830. Both bills would make permanent the 2020 Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program that was created to help customers during the COVID-19 pandemic, permanent. And additionally, 8032 would provide $1.1 billion annually to fund the program, whereas 3830 does not have any funding attached to it. Roseville supported the creation of this program and has been able to actually provide assistance to at least 295 customers through the program and is supportive of making it a permanent program. I will end my presentation this evening on a positive note.
Thank you.
This year, Environmental Utilities submitted our joint Roseville and Placer County Water Agency raw water conveyance project for a congressionally directed funding. And this project will provide a backup intake further up on the American River, thereby reducing our reliance on the intake at Folsom Reservoir, and that's especially important during times of drought. We submitted a $3 million appropriations request with our congressional delegation, and we're happy to share with the commission that the Senators Padilla and Butler have included our project in their congressionally directed spending requests to the Appropriations Committee. We're still super early in the process. We do not anticipate them to take any action on these bills until after they return in November after the election. So a long ways to go, but a very positive first step. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
I have one. Going back to SB 1255, what did you say? Did you say the suggested amount is versus the actual cost for administration?
So, yes, a water agency would be required to do a study to, in the bill, it states that the benefit to a customer would be 20%. So we would have to do calculations to figure out, A, how many customers might we have that would be needing the assistance? And then because, as the bill's written currently, we would have to provide a 20% discount on their water and wastewater bills. And so we would have to do the studies to figure out how much money we need to provide that 20% to those customers. And then we would automatically put that on the ratepayer's bill.
Okay, you had a question?
Well, my question is, how are you going to calculate it? Because we don't measure wastewater. We pay a flat rate on wastewater. So I guess there's a correlation though, because you can assume if your intake is X, your outtake's probably going to be Y. So you could develop a formula, but I'm thinking kill this bill. Don't even, let's.
It just made it out of committee on a 6 or 7-0 vote. And in 2022, they sent something similar to the governor, except for it was a state-run program. I'm not seeing a way of stopping it at this point in time.
And then a quick, chromium 6 is, chrome 6 is a forever chemical, right? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I love that naming them Gen X chemicals. I thought that's kind
Yes.
of slap in the face, but anyway, interesting.
Are there any other questions for staff from the commission at this time? Is there anyone from the public who'd like to address the commission on this issue? Not seeing any public comment. Thank you for your presentation, Noel. And next on our agenda is any board member, commissioner, or staff reports. Are there any reports from staff? Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Do we have any proposed future agenda items? Does anyone have any agenda items you'd like to add?
Commissioner Maish had brought up something, and now I'd have to go back, it's 2 meetings back, that he wanted to see an analysis of, it's probably in the minutes, help me. But I don't know and probably it's probably not, maybe Scott or Eric knows, I mean.
There's an item in August. It's around the duck curve that Commissioner Mesh had
Okay,
requested.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other items they'd like to suggest for future meetings? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.